You're listening to the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast, episode number 72. Now, today I want to specifically talk about gaslighting. And gaslighting is one of these things that has been tossed around. It's been used improperly, and it waters down the reality of what gaslighting really is when people misuse it. So, I want to talk about not only what gaslighting is and make sure that that's really clear, but I also want to make the focus of this episode about how you could be gaslighting yourself. And, if you've been in an emotionally abusive relationship, an abusive, toxic marriage, anything like that, you know that gaslighting is a horrific thing to experience. And we don't want to do that to ourselves. A lot of victims and survivors of emotional abuse do this. And I'm going to help you today to first identify if maybe you are doing this to yourself, and two, how to stop it. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast, a podcast specifically designed to help you heal after a toxic or narcissistic relationship. This podcast teaches you to use your subconscious mind to go from feeling stuck to set free. In here, you will learn how to use the power of your own mind to free yourself from emotional pain, move forward with confidence, and experience the inner peace you deserve in your healing journey after emotional abuse. I'm your host and subconscious reprogramming coach, Allison Dagny. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is define gaslighting, right? You can find definitions online if you just Google this, but I think the most important part is to distinguish the difference between gaslighting and lying. Even my kids sometimes, I'll hear them, they throw around this term of gaslighting. If their sibling just lies to them, they'll be like, "Why are you gaslighting me?" And I'm like, "You're not using that term properly," right? So I know that this has become very popularized and people are just throwing it around. Gaslighting is when someone, yes, that it may include elements of lying, and oftentimes it does, but it's also when they make you doubt your reality. They make you doubt yourself in the process of that. So, for instance, I remember a time when my ex-husband and I, we had two sets of keys for the minivan that we owned. And I was primarily the driver of the minivan. He had another car. And I always put my keys to that minivan on a little key hook when you walked in the house. So I always stuck my keys in the same place. Well, one day we were driving somewhere and he couldn't find his set of keys. So he asked me to use mine. So I gave him my keys and we left and went wherever we went. And I think at this time, I don't remember exactly where we went, but I want to say it was like a funeral or something like that. And when we got back, I was like, "Where are my keys?" And he was like, "I don't know. I don't have your keys." And I remember thinking, well, I always put my keys on the hook, so you were the one to drive last, so you had to put them somewhere. And his extra spare key was back in his room or something on the nightstand. So for a really long time, I just was using the spare set of keys because we couldn't find my set, the ones that I always put on the hook. So during this process, he was making me believe that I had misplaced the keys, that I had lost them, that I had put them somewhere. And I actually started to believe it. I really did. I was starting to question myself. Maybe he did put them on the hook and maybe I moved them or maybe I stuck them in my purse. And I remember looking frantically for those keys, even though somewhere logically I knew he was the last one to use them. But I was doubting myself, okay? So this is an example of gaslighting. Let's fast forward 3, 4, 5 months. I can't remember how long forward. He had to get his suit out. He didn't wear a suit very often. I don't know if he had an interview or a meeting or something.
And he went into the closet, and I guess when he got his suit out to wear it, he reached into the pocket and pulled out the keys that had been missing. And he's like, "Oh, I found the keys." And I said, "Wow, where did you find them?" He said, "They were in my suit pocket." And I was like, "See, I didn't misplace them, right? It was proof and evidence right then and there." And he said, "You must have put them in my coat pocket or a suit pocket." And I remember just feeling so like somebody hit me across the head with a 2x4. I couldn't even believe it that he was saying this. Like, why did he think, or, well, I guess he didn't think it, but why would he say that I would have gone out of my way to put it there? And I asked him, and I said, "Why would you say that? Like, I wouldn't do that. Why would I just take my keys like, we're missing the keys? Like, why would I put them in your suit pocket?" And he said, "Oh, so that you didn't have to take the blame and responsibility for losing them." And this is a perfect example of gaslighting. So gaslighting is not just simply about someone lying to you and saying, "No, I never did that," or "That never happened," right? These can be elements of gaslighting. So I don't want you to get confused. But the part that makes it gaslighting is when you, as the person on the receiving end, begin to doubt your own reality, begin to lose trust in yourself, and start to look at that person as an authority on you and your life and what happened. So much so that you question yourself immediately and immediately go to them for the answers. That's what gaslighting is. Now, I'm going to be bringing in the subconscious mind when we're talking about this particular topic, and our past programming, the conditioning that happened to us during the abuse, to understand self-gaslighting, right? Because all of these things happened to us in the past, throughout our lives, somehow to create this self-doubt. And so if we move forward beyond the abuse and we are on our healing journeys and we are doing all the things to try to get our life back on track, but we are doing the gaslighting on ourselves, that is going to hold us back. That's going to keep us stuck. And you know that this is all about getting unstuck. This is all about unlocking the things inside of us that are going to help us become the best versions of who we are and who we want to be, and reaching that vision of what we want our life to look like. Here's something I want you to remember. It's not that you can't trust yourself. It's not that you're not good enough. It's not that you are unable to make sound decisions, right? That's not what this is about. It's that you can't see that this is possible for you. Your mind has been so clouded by other people's programming and conditioning upon you that you can't see it. It is there. You are able to make sound decisions. You are capable of opinions and thoughts and ideas and choices, right? You are fully capable of that. You just can't see it. So anytime that we're stuck in these thought loops of, mistrust of ourselves, and we end up gaslighting ourselves, it's not because it's not possible. It's because we can't see the possibility. All right, so where does this term gaslighting come from? Well, I did some research a while ago, and you can find all kinds of information about this, but there was a British play that they turned into a movie back in the 1930s, and it was called The Gaslight. And the plot is essentially about a man, a husband, who is emotionally, mentally manipulating and abusing his wife into believing that she's crazy by changing the intensity of the gas lamps at the house, right? Because you turn up a gas light, right? It's not like electricity, it's a gas light. So he does all these other crazy making things in the play, in the movie, disappearing items around the house and things like that, which is what I talked about earlier. And this creates this confusion in his wife. And he was essentially denying her reality by convincing her that she was crazy. So he would lie, right? Because he's doing this, he's making these behaviors happen. And when she asks him about it, he lies. And he then takes it a step further and says, "You're crazy. That never happened. I don't know what you're talking about," right? So this is extremely upsetting because you are watching this person slowly over time, like a frog in a boiling pot of water. It doesn't just, you don't put a frog in a boiling pot of water or it jumps right out. You put it in the water when the water's cool, and then you slowly turn up the heat, and then the frog boils to death because it doesn't sense the difference in the temperature changes slowly over time, which is essentially what happens when you're being gaslit. Same thing. So this is where this originated from, this term gaslighting. Now, most people who are in an emotionally abusive relationship at some point, because their reality has been doubted so heavily by an abuser, will start to record things, like audio record conversations, write things down so that they don't forget. Because what's happened is they have a seed of truth somewhere in their mind, and the other person is causing them to doubt themselves. So what they do is try to help themselves from being gaslit by tracking this stuff, recording it, so that they can go back and be like, wait a minute, no, that's actually not what happened. So this person is telling me this, but I actually have a conversation recorded where they actually did say that, and the other person is denying it, or something along those lines. So you can do this, especially if you're still in an emotionally abusive relationship. I just would be very careful not to let the abuser know that you're doing it. Instead of like recording something and then bringing it to their attention and saying, "Oh, but yeah, I have proof. You actually did say it," right? Because they're just going to keep denying it no matter what. But it does help the victim or the person maintain their sanity and clarity of mind when they have that to fall back on. So I've known a lot of people who will track these things. They don't present it to the abuser or say you're lying or like anything like that. I have proof. They just use it as a coping mechanism during the time that maybe they're trying to escape the abuse or something like that, so that they can maintain that level of clarity inside of themselves so that they aren't feeling gaslit in that moment. Now, let's shift over and talk about how your subconscious mind processes your information and your memories and how that's stored. Because if you've listened to my podcast before, you know, and I say this all the time, that the subconscious mind runs 95% of the show. It determines how you feel. It determines how you behave, right? So it's going to be really important for us to take a look at how the subconscious mind is processing information and memories, specifically because the information that you are experiencing while you're being abused, and if you're being conditioned and programmed throughout your life, all of that stuff gets stored inside of that heavy 95% that's driving how you feel and how you behave. So it's keeping that stuff like a big storage room, like a huge storage room full of files, full of folders, and it is tracking all the memories and all the beliefs, all the traumas, all the experiences, right? So if that piece in your subconscious is really inundated with gaslighting, of course you're going to doubt yourself. Of course you're going to believe that you can't make a decision. Of course you're going to question everything you think and everything you say, and was it my fault, and did I do this, and am I going crazy, and do I have a bad memory, right? All of this stuff is just a product of your subconscious mind and all the things that happen to you that are creating those neural pathways, the neural pathways that are on repeat in your mind. Now, it doesn't really make a huge difference if you were gaslit in a toxic relationship versus if you were gaslit in a family relationship. Gaslighting is gaslighting, right? So the impact of of what gaslighting would do to a child will be carried into adulthood, right? But even as an adult, gaslighting can impact you, and that will be carried throughout the rest of your life unless you shift that subconscious programming that happened to you. And what this does to you in your subconscious is it affects severely the way that you perceive yourself and your ability to confidently make decisions in your life. And there's a reason, right? Because the person who did the gaslighting wants you to be disempowered. They want you to feel like you are unable to make a decision. Because if you are confused and you are only looking to that person for guidance or advice or decisions, right? They're in control. They have 100% control of your life because you are doubting yourself to such a high degree. I want to bring up some language that is highly invalidating that happens in self-gaslighting, right? Because we already know what gaslighting is. We already know how other people are doing this to their victims. And a lot of times we take on those same phrases for ourselves, even after we've left the abuser, escaped the relationship, whatever that might be, got a divorce. So the phrases that you might hear from an abuser can actually be things that you say to yourself. You carry those with you because they've been programmed into you, right? Like brainwashed. So things that you might say would be, it wasn't that bad, or other people had it worse than me, or I shouldn't complain. Things like that, right? And there could be a lot more of those. So what these kinds of phrases do when we hold them and we hang on to them and we allow them to run on autopilot is they invalidate our personal experiences that we went through with this abuse. And this contributes to us gaslighting ourselves. So if you are gaslighting yourself and you hear yourself saying like, well, it wasn't that bad, or, other people had way worse trauma than me and I shouldn't really complain about it. And, I have a pretty good life and, all of these things, right? And I get it, right? Because part of this is you're trying to be positive and you're trying to look on the bright side, right? All of that. However, if you are stuck believing that it wasn't that bad and other people had it worse than me, that can actually lead to very toxic behaviors for your life. And what am I talking about here? Low self-worth, right? Not having confidence in yourself, not being able to set boundaries. Because if you believe these kinds of things in your subconscious mind, going into the next relationship, you might encounter somebody very similarly and put up with it again. Or you may encounter somebody who was even less abusive than the other person and then think, oh, well, this is a good thing. For instance, my ex-abuser, who is remarried now to a very nice young lady, I don't have a bad thing to say about her. She, from what I had heard, was in a physically abusive relationship. And as you know, when you're in physical abuse, you're also experiencing emotional abuse and maybe some other things. But when she moved from a physically abusive relationship into a relationship with my now ex, who is only emotionally abusive, or was at least only emotionally abusive to me, she may be looking at that like, wow, this is such an upgrade, right? He doesn't push me down the stairs. He doesn't hurt me. He doesn't physically put his hands on me, right? But we all know that mental and emotional abuse is just as damaging, if not more, to our psychological and emotional well-being. So when you are gaslighting yourself into believing that things weren't that bad, or other people have got it worse than me, or I shouldn't be complaining about this because I really have a pretty good life, and all you're doing there is you're invalidating yourself. You're doing exactly what the other person did to you to try to keep you under control. But there's also some underlying things that we need to talk about regarding this that I think is really important that has to go into the subconscious piece of this. So if you have a pen and paper, you might want to get that and take some notes. If you invalidate your experience with abuse, what does that do for you? Right? Because there's always a reason. There's always a positive intention. Our brains are trying to keep us feeling safe. So, this isn't the case for everyone, but for a lot of people, it's emotional avoidance. I don't have to face what happened to me, right? Then you need to ask yourself, if I face it, what do I believe about it? What does it mean about me and the relationship or the other person if it was that bad? And this is where you really get into the weeds and you really start to figure out what's going on inside of your mind, because answering these questions is going to unlock what's going on inside your subconscious mind that's keeping you in this state of self-gaslighting. For a lot of people, it's way less painful to face the reality that it was that bad, right? It's way easier to tell yourself it wasn't that bad because of whatever you're making it mean. So, if part of you is still looking or searching or trying to prove that it really was abuse and it feels so out of reach to you, like it's forced that you're trying to find some proof and evidence that it actually was abuse, then start with why you think it wasn't. Ask yourself, why do you think it wasn't abuse? And write down all the things that come after that. Then what you will understand at that point is what you're believing in your subconscious mind about it. Now, what I want you to remember is that it's not just the reality of the situation that you need to look at, but also the judgment that you're placing on it. So, for instance, if what you are saying is, well, I believe that it wasn't that bad because he didn't hit me, right? And I could say that because my ex never hit me. It's not the fact that he didn't hit me is why I think it's not that bad. It's that I believe I should be grateful that he didn't hit me, right? It's imparting the judgment on that. So and then I should somehow be happy that he didn't use cuss words, or that I should be looking on the bright side, right? That should is where we impart the judgment, and that's what our subconscious mind is doing. So this type of practice of getting into your brain and pulling out these subconscious beliefs is not easy, right? This is something that took me a lot of time to learn and to practice and become an expert with. And that is why I help people in a 12-week program to teach them exactly how to bring these subconscious beliefs out. I have a lot of very specialized types of questions and techniques that I use to help you do this. So if you're following along on this podcast and you're taking your notes and you're trying to answer these questions, I hope that you're able to get to the source. But if you're not, you can always reach out to me. You can always schedule a free call to see if we are the right fit to work together, to see if this is something that I can help you with. Now, I do want to share a couple of tips that you can use to help you recognize and combat self-gaslighting, okay? And the number one thing is to be compassionate with yourself. Because if you are not compassionate with yourself, you're judging yourself. So think about things like that you would say to someone else who was saying to themselves that it wasn't that bad, and he never hit me, and whatever that might be. Or other people have got it worse than me, right? If this was your daughter or your best friend or your sister and you knew that they went through the exact same things that you did, would you tell them, yeah, you're right, it really wasn't that bad? You'd be totally invalidating that person, okay? So be very careful about being compassionate and kind to yourself to make sure that you aren't invalidating these experiences that you went through. It's also really important to challenge your negative self-talk. And I have mentioned this many, many times before, but when you are dealing with these repetitive subconscious beliefs in your head, you've got to pay attention. You have to hear the negativity in the words, practice identifying it, and then challenge this negative self-talk. The other thing is find someone to support you. If you're not seeing a therapist, maybe therapy is good for you. Find a coach, get in a support group, talk with people who've also experienced these kinds of things. Read books. This will help you revalidate. Like my book is When Tears Leave Scars, is emotional abuse. Like that is the core theme of my book. If you read that book, you will be validated. Okay? Even if you're someone who is like, well, I don't know if it was abuse or I'm not sure, you will receive validation in the pages of my book. I've had so many people and so many reviews say, oh my gosh, this is my story. This was so validating. Thank you for writing this. Okay? So if you need extra validation, find it through support, find it through coaches, therapists, support groups, books, things like that, right? That will help you reinforce, oh yeah, okay, these other people are saying it's abuse, so yeah, it was abuse. Another thing you can do is journal. Journal is so key for getting to the root, so key for helping you unlock things in your subconscious mind. It slows down the subconscious mind. So when you get really relaxed and you sit there and you journal out your thoughts and emotions, this helps give you a lot of clarity and a lot of self-awareness about what's going on in there versus just allowing these things to kind of run rampant in your head. And having, a support network, right? Not just maybe one person you can lean on, but multiple or many people that you can lean on. Find support groups and not just one-on-one, but maybe like a Facebook group even would be really helpful for validating. And I have a Facebook group you can join. It's called Beyond Hurt, and I'll link it in the show notes here if you want to join that. But another thing is your affirmations and positive self-talk. I love affirmations, but I have to keep reiterating that positive affirmations don't work. I'm going to actually create a whole new podcast episode on why they don't work, and I'm going to put that in my Premier content. So if you're not subscribed to my Premier content, it's $3 a month. You can go out online and get the link for that. And you can subscribe to that additional content. But, just as sort of high level, positive affirmations are just not speaking the language of the subconscious mind. And so you could just repeat something 1,000 times until you're blue in the face, but it's not going to change the neuropathway in your brain that actually creates lasting change for you. All right, so I hope this episode has given you some clarity to understanding gaslighting, and share this episode with other people who you know are misinterpreting it, who don't understand what gaslighting is, and this will help. But also, having this understanding about your own self-gaslighting if you are doing this. This is very common. A lot of people experience this. I even went through this at one point during my healing journey where I thought, well, maybe I'm being overly sensitive, or maybe it really wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And you start questioning your reality and start doubting yourself. And so the way out of that isn't to, make things feel worse for you, like, oh, it was horrible, like negative talk, and like I had these terrible experiences and they were so horrible, right? That's not really the purpose here. So I don't want you to get confused about that. It's not that we're trying to tell yourself how awful it was, but it is important to recognize the reality of the situation so that you're not downplaying the experience, because if you downplay the experience, you're more likely to end up in that same kind of situation again. And you're doubting yourself. You're doubting the fact that you can actually see what was happening right in front of your face, right? So that's why it's important to give yourself the validation, the insight, and the reality check. Like, yes, this happened to me. That doesn't mean that you have to maintain victim mode, right? You can say, this happened in the past. I know and I recognize that this was part of my life, and it definitely happened, and it definitely was abuse. Now I'm in a different stage of my life, and I'm healing and I'm moving forward, and that's wonderful. So if you have any questions, or if you have any ideas of topics you would like for me to address, questions you want me to answer, I am happy to do that. Just reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook, or you can email me at allison@whentearsleavescars.com. Please be kind to yourself. Please give yourself compassion. This is all just part of the healing process, and I am here to support you. Talk to you next week.
Thank you for being here with me today in the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast. I hope you found value here with me. If this podcast episode was helpful to you, I'd love for you to hit subscribe and leave me a review. My goal is to help you go from feeling stuck to set free. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, and you can check out whentearsleavescars.com for more resources and information to help you with your own emotional abuse recovery. Until next time, here's to believing in